What's up guys, Hype Sounds for you today. I'm going to show you guys how to make this crazy ODESZA synth style. Some would argue that it's just a variation of the super saw, but it's maybe a little bit different. I'm going to show you guys how to get kind of the sound you want. So let's take another listen real quick. I even have this fun little guitar riff I kind of was tinkering around with. Just kind of want to show you guys. But the sound that we're going to play is just this one. This ODESZA sound over here. This is it by itself. So let's get cracking. So right up here I have my new massive channel, and I already dropped in my MIDI track. This is just kind of very silly D minor progression I wrote, and the chord voicing here is actually going to be a huge part of the sound. One of the things is maybe you don't want to overload with too many notes, and you really want to spread your voices across the entire keyboard. So you want to do these crazy inversions, so you have like your root way down a bunch. So it's pretty scant here. This is actually a huge, tremendous part of the sound, is just really spreading the sound, making it really wide. There's a few more tips and tricks I'll show for you guys. So if you're in it just for the patch, you can just copy it down right here. This is it. I call it expensive because it's this expensive sound. Deadmau5 put a track on SoundCloud the other day, called it Expensive Step. It was a satire of current electronic music, how it all kind of seems to have this kind of Chainsmokers-y, ODESZA-y kind of expensive, full, rich kind of sound. You know, you can follow along with my Chainsmokers tutorial. It's kind of like this, but we'll see it's a little bit different. So I'm going to kind of walk you guys step by step through it. So anyway, starting off, we're going to want to grab our new massive, and I already have this D major progression in it or whatever, and so let's give that a listen by itself. Can't forget to unmute myself. Okay. So that sounded kind of crappy. You can tell that the saw is kind of the wave that we want to use, but we want to make it fuller. So the first thing we want is this pulse saw pulse width modulation. So what a PWM is basically a square wave where you can actually modulate the duty cycle, which is a little more complicated. If you've ever done anything with like electronics before, you'll know a little bit more about pulse width modulation. When you have sound waves, you have like a sinusoidal thing where it crosses the zero, but with pulse width modulation, you can modulate how much of the sound wave is above zero or below zero. A little complicated for this tutorial, so I won't go into it too much. Anyway, we want this pulse width modulation. Let's turn the pulse width down a bit, keep the amplitude where it's at. PLS position, saw position, doesn't matter a whole lot. Let's just drop it down an octave. You know, I can't quite remember how this other one went. I'll kind of maybe jump back to it, take a look at it here and there, but for the most part, I think I've got the sound down pat by now. Anyway, let's grab our other oscillators because this is going to be a really wide sound. We're going to detune them a little bit, so let's use these electric wavetables. You know, some of my other videos, I like these electric ones. They sound pretty good. I've been all through this fucking thing. There's, you know, so many sounds, so many wavetables, but which ones sound good? Well, you know, I'm going to tell you. This one sounds pretty good for the sound we're trying to achieve, this crazy super saw kind of sound. Of course, these square saws are our bread and butter. We love those. Sine square, sine triangle, you can get some really resonant sounds with not a lot of harmonics there. It's really interesting. Sometimes I'll mess with the poly saw, like my Fetty Wap synth. Rough math can be kind of fun. These are pretty good for some organ sounds. These ones kind of suck unless you're going to make like the Woody one is like the only one I kind of like. These ones I just don't ever mess with. Woody one's good for making your little Kygo, little plucky flute sound. Groans are good for dubstep wobbles and shit. Drives are good for risers if you want to make like a riser that's going to rise with pitch, so you can assign like your LFO with a performer or something to your pitch modulation, but won't go into that too much now. Kangaroo's kind of fun. Frozen's kind of fun. I like classic. Carbon's okay. Let's see. These all kind of suck. These are dubstep sounds up here. These ones suck. Flenders are kind of funny. They're like organs. These are good organ sounds. AI is good for making that fancy what is it, DJ Mustard kind of sounds. Yeah, that's about it. These ones are just weird, so don't mess with those. Anyway, we want the electric. That was a little off topic, but let's drop that down a bit, 1 octave. Let's leave this one where it is for shits and giggles. Let's turn these amps up. And then for fun, we're going to assign some phase. Ooh, some phase. Love messing with this modulation oscillator down here. This one's really tricky, guys. You can make some really crazy sounding sounds with this mod osc. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. So for whatever reason, just like the other patch I made, we're going to route it right to oscillator 3. So this phase oscillator is going to modulate our electric oscillator down here. For now, let's just route them all to filter 1. Maybe I didn't put them on filter 1 on the other one, but it doesn't really matter too much because this sound is super, super malleable, so we can make all kinds of different crazy sounds and make it how we want. Anyway, let's grab a low pass filter, and probably what is pretty big with this sound is going to be our envelope number 4. Now, if you remember correctly, envelope number 4 modulates not only our amplitude, but wherever we send it to. So by default, it's on our amp mod, but let's just grab it and put it on our cutoff here. So we'll turn it on up. And what's pretty big with this sound is a nice, not nice, but a gratuitous amount of attack. So you don't want it to be too plucky, too transient. You just kind of want it to be mellow, you know, just kind of fade in. And obviously a gratuitous amount of sidechain really, really helps the sound. Let's just give the other one, well, let's give this one a listen first, and then we'll compare it to the other sound I've already made. So that's not too bad. Playing the other sound, we'll give that one a listen now. You can see here I did some really crazy modulation here. So you can either have the spectrum, which is default, your bend plus, bend minus, or formant. They're pretty weird. Generally, I don't really use them unless I'm trying to do like my crazy DJ Mustard sounds, Iggy Azalea fancy sounds. I almost feel bad saying it, calling it an Iggy Azalea sound because she just pretty much ripped off the sound. But without digressing too much, I put this one on formant. Really doesn't matter. You can see here I have a ton of macros. So I'm not going to go too overboard assigning macros. I don't want this video to be too long. I'm really jabbering on as is. Anyway, you can see here they're all in the middle, which was kind of dumb, which doesn't matter anyway because I have the mix all the way to mix 1, so I'm only taking sound through here. If I have it between the two, you'll hear it comes through this thing with no filter. So I'll show you guys how that sounds. Doesn't really sound a whole lot different. So you can see that this low pass isn't doing a whole lot. This 8 right here is only being affected by this. So this affects where it starts from basically. So when I turn this 8, it affects where the filter starts from. Not too important, but I'll show you guys what's what in the sound we're making right now. So without deviating from our sound too much, let's jump back into this one. Turn off this one because sometimes I play the wrong sound and I confuse my viewers. So anyway, like I did in the last one, I can't even remember what was what, but let's grab a simple delay, where are you? Maybe it's only on this one. Delay synced, that's the one. Okay, like the way I like to do it in my other sounds, you know, I like to do 3/16 and 4/16. A little bit of dry wet, doesn't really matter. Maybe, who knows, maybe a little teletube, a little bit of distortion just to thicken up the sound, you know. As many audio aficionados will tell you, digital distortion is bad, but as Skrillex sometimes says, digital distortion is good. So whose word are you going to take? Who knows? Play around with it. Anyway, so this long attack is going to give us a lot of this sound. The next thing we can do is do like I did on the other sound and assign a macro right here. We'll just call this the cutoff. And so when we turn, first we have to turn this up. And so basically that sets how far I turn this up, sets the range of how much it will modulate the sound when I modulate this. So if I modulate this all the way, it means that this little arrow will go all the way around to wherever this goes. And so if I turn this proportionally, you know, to like 50% or whatever, that means it'll only go to 50% how far I set this little yellow thing. So it'll only go up to about here. But that is that's pretty much it as far as that goes. Like the other patch I was just showing you guys, we can mess with this intensity and the wavetable position over here. These are ones you're going to want to play around with yourself, dial it in just how you like them. I am not an expert, despite what you may think. I think you guys can make better sounds than me. I think you guys can make sounds that you like better than me, and I think you guys will enjoy the sounds you make better than the ones that I make. So please play around with them, but you can also download the sound at the patch in the description below along with all my other sounds. The link in the description below, excuse me. Anyway, let's go back to some distortion. Let's grab, my first instinct when I'm doing a little bit of distortion in these inserts here is either sine shaper or parabolic shaper. Hard clipper clips the waveform, introduces a lot of digital distortion. That's something sometimes I like to play with. I don't really like to jump into that a whole lot. Bit crusher actually reduces your bit depth. So what bit depth means is in digital electronics, you have like a flip-flop, what's called a flip-flop, and it introduces binary. So if you have, let's say, 4 bits, that's 2 to the 4th power. So that's 16 different levels of audio. But when we have audio, normally CD quality is 16-bit and 24-bit is higher quality. What that corresponds to is the amount of discrete audio amplitude levels that are available. So if we have 16-bit, that's 2 to the 16th. I'm sorry, but I can't remember that right off the top of my head. So that's very, very many different levels of audio amplitude that we can show, and 24 bits, which is even more. And I actually took, I'm a physics major, so I took digital electronics last year, and we had a homework question that asked us about bit depth and human hearing. And the result is that the dynamic range, which is the very smallest, lightest little sound that the human ears can hear, is in between 16-bit and 24-bit. So 16 bits of bit depth do not capture all the discrete levels of audio that the human ears are capable of hearing, while 24-bit over captures that. So when in doubt, export all your stuff at 24-bit. That makes it for higher quality. But anyway, I just took a huge tangent here. What this means is it basically reduces the bit depth, kind of crushes the quality of the sound, but that introduces some weird digital distortion. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Normally I don't like it, so use it sparingly. Whatever. Sample and hold don't really matter to me too much. Frequency shifter just sounds crazy as shit. I wouldn't ever fuck with that one. If you really want this extra high pass, low pass filter, I don't even know if I've ever used it. Tinker around with that one, but man. Anyway, here's a little bit of release just for gigs. And then another part of the sound that's going to be kind of important is you're going to want to mess with your glide time. So this alters how quickly the sound changes between your two sounds. So let's give it a listen and I'll tinker around with it a bit. Wow, this patch actually sounds kind of bad, I don't really know what I did too horribly different, but let me just jump into the other patch and I'll talk about it since I have a hard time immediately reproducing the sounds that I have in other patches. I apologize, guys. Anyway, I have also a lot of techniques on this ODESZA synth, so making the sound is half the battle. If we go into it, so first, you're going to want to set your position, your pulse width, and your amplitude kind of like I have it set up. Like I've already said, you don't want to have be a robot and just copy my settings because I didn't do it as well as you guys probably can. But some of these settings sound pretty good, so I won't mess with them too horribly much. You see here this phase, I didn't turn it up all the way, nor did I turn it up an octave, which is 12 semitones. I just have this macro assigned to it. I have the macro turned up quite a bit, so you can pretty much get away if you didn't have the macro here, turn the phase to about there. The rest of it, I don't have any white noise. We can turn that off, save some CPU feedback. You might as well introduce a little feedback. It gives it a little more quote-unquote warmth, but again, not that important. This Parabolic Shaper introduces the distortion I was talking about before. Again, I have a macro on there, and I'm just cranking it to hell and back. So, do not use it conservatively. Be very, very liberal with your distortion. Look, I have 2 inserts with Parabolic Shapers on them, so I'm distorting the living shit out of the sound. Also, I'm sorry for swearing so much. Let's see what else I got going on. So I started with this delay synced, which was weird. The last sound, it was probably the Teletube that sounded so bad. So maybe start with a delay synced. I again have a reverb or a macro here. I don't have it on right now. I don't know why. Maybe I just put it there in case I wanted to mess with it in the future. Maybe I put it in there because maybe I thought you guys would like it when you download these sounds. Who exactly knows what was going through my head? Sometimes I do some crazy things. Reverb, a little bit of reverb never hurt anybody. A lot of reverb hurt a few people, but a lot of people like it. Yeah, you know, you just want to kind of put a little reverb on it, put a little dimensionality into the sound, but you'll see in just a second I'll explain some of the post-processing I have on the sound. And then I have the glide just turned up just a little bit, and then your EQ, I gave it a little high shelf and a lot of low shelf. So that's pretty much the sound, guys. I'm sorry I wasn't so organized with designing this sound, but now I'm going to go into some of my tips and tricks. Number one, the sidechain. Sidechain is king for this sound. You'll see I have a really shitty, is this it? I have a really shitty synth kick I made. Normally I use samples, and I have quite a few samples that I know I really like, but this is just a synth kick I wrote like maybe a few years ago, and I was just messing around with these sounds. I thought, hell, let's use a massive track for our kick. So anyway, I have that coming through some stuff to make it sound good, but who cares? What matters is that I have this Sidechain compressor on it, and you can see here I actually turned the gain up, so it's not going to change how hot this kick comes in, but it's going to change how much the sidechain comes in. And so sidechain is going to be absolutely huge for these sounds. We're going to want to really crank the sidechain up, so it's going to compress every time the kick hits. I have the kick turned off, but it'll sound like this. You can see here also that I have a compressor sidechained with the snare. I forgot to do that a lot when I was kind of starting producing. I would frustrate myself endlessly trying to think, why does my snare not cut through my mix? You know, when I turn everything off and I just listen to the snare and the kick and I try to balance them, they sound pretty good together, but when I play everything else and I have everything else sidechained to the kick but not to the snare really gets buried. And I thought, oh my god, I didn't sidechain it to the snare. I am such an idiot. So don't be like me. Sidechain stuff to the snare, but don't do it as much as the kick. You really want stuff to come out with the kick, but the snare has a lot of upper harmonics. So I can't even remember the name, but there's a curve that shows the frequency response based on different volumes, which basically means that human ears are able to perceive transients in pitch better. So to summarize what I'm saying there, it means that if you have a sound with more higher frequency sounds, it can be quieter and your ears will still pick it up better than if your kick, see the synth kick is like all these low sub frequencies. I'll just play it for you. See, there's like nothing up here in this like 3K to 10K hertz, which is like super easy. Human ears detect these frequencies right here super easily, while these ones are not so much. So you're gonna have to make your bass sounds louder for them to sound more balanced. That's basically what I'm getting at. And then another super handy trick I have here is the Haas Effect. Oh, the Haas Effect is king. I'm letting you guys in on one right now. So basically what I have here is I made two channels. So basically how do I start this? So anyway, I'll go down and grab a simple delay, and then I will link it, and I will make it time. So it's only on time, and then I turned it way down, and then I right click on it and I click group. So then it makes a audio effect rack. I'm gonna close this for now so I can focus on this one, and I create a new chain. And so what this does is it makes two channels for audio to come through. So audio will come through both channels. It basically doubles the channels, but what we will do is we will pan one channel all the way to the right and one channel all the way to the left. And so what that does is really enhances the stereo field. But the kicker here is that we're going to delay one of the channels here by between like 10 and 30 milliseconds, which just kind of gives it some kind of like psychoacoustic spatiality. Spatiality isn't a real word, but in this context it works. Anyway, so that's a nice trick right there. Anyway, I made a really handy audio effect track that I like. Where I can modulate my dry wet, my pan, like to the degree at which I'm panning the sounds, and then when I'm doubling the sound it gets louder, so I have this one on the volume, which basically modulates the gain on the other sound. But yeah, that's about it, guys. I'm glad you enjoyed the video. If you enjoyed the video, you can download this sound as well as all my other sounds at the link in the description below. I kind of went off on a tangent on this one. I wasn't really too organized. This is one that's a lot like all my other sounds, or at least some of the sounds I've done before in the past, but I tried to let you guys in on some of my processes with how I kind of pan stuff, my little synth kick, all kinds of other stuff. Let's listen to it with some hats and kind of all together now. Alright guys, that's the sound. I hope you had a good one. Hype Sounds out.